Hello, my name is Alex Homan, and today I will be discussing genetically modified organisms, or more specifically, GMO crops. GMO crops are something that are present in our everyday lives. During the course of this presentation, a few objectives will be covered. I will talk about what GMOs are, how they are made, pros and cons of GMOs, if they are safe, and applications of GMOs, specifically in Africa and regions susceptible to drought. GMOs are essentially what they sound like. They're organisms that have had their genetic makeup altered to improve upon a desired characteristic. The altered characteristic can be anything from resistance to insects and herbicides, protection against blight, and increasing important substances such as beta-carotene, which is converted by the body into vitamin A. These are just a few examples of what GMOs can be modified to accomplish. Making a GMO takes a lot of time, effort, and research. The first step is to identify the trait of interest. As the chart shows, plants are then screened for that trait. That particular trait is then isolated and inserted into the plant being modified. This can be done one of two ways, using either a gene gun or implanting that gene into bacteria that the seed will absorb. Those seeds are then planted in growth chambers or greenhouses to ensure that the gene grows and is not contaminated with other organisms. The growth chambers also allow an opportunity to determine the best growth conditions. It is important to point out that GMOs are not the same as gene-edited organisms. GMOs have been edited in a way that would have never occurred as a result of natural evolution. Gene editing simply modifies the plant by rewriting the genetic code to promote a more desirable trait. GMOs are something that we eat every single day of our lives. As you can see in this image, 30,000 GMOs are on the shelves today. 94% of soybeans, 90% of cotton, and 88% of corn grown in the United States are GMOs. GMOs have many benefits. As I stated earlier, as the chart shows, crops can be modified to include more beneficial substances that we as humans need. For example, rice modified with daffodil genes contains more beta-carotene, which the human body converts into vitamin A. Organisms can also be modified to increase yield. As you can see in the picture, the top ear of corn was not modified and the bottom one was. Higher yield equals more food equals less starvation. Edible vaccines are currently under development for a variety of common illnesses. This is potentially beneficial in a variety of ways. When combined with GMOs, it would make widespread vaccination possible. This idea also holds potential for Africa, which I will discuss in more detail later. The technology and advancement of GMOs have allowed them to be resistant to certain types of pests and herbicides. This cuts the amount of spraying that farmers do by half. That ensures less runoff in a healthy environment. GMOs are not perfect. There are a few issues associated with them. This picture shows a riot occurring in Europe. Many riots, such as this one, have erupted in Europe over both the usage and issues associated with GMOs. One of the main reasons for rioting in Europe was the unknown associated with GMOs. It is unknown if GMOs have any effect on the human body. Research points both ways. For as many articles that say GMOs are safe, there are just as many saying they are unsafe. You can see the difference in the picture that GMOs can create. But what happens when the resistant sugar beet interbreeds with weeds, or what happens when insects mutate and become resistant to pesticides? Then, how do we remove weeds and pests? Even with the issues associated with GMOs, applications exist in which GMOs are ideal. Africa is a continent that would benefit greatly from GMOs. Crops can be modified with genes from cacti and other plants that thrive in dry environments. This would help to improve the growth in Africa, as it is a relatively dry environment. As I mentioned earlier, vaccines could be very beneficial for Africa, but not in the sense of vaccinating people. The same technology that is being used for the vaccines can also be used in GMOs to remove heavy metal from the soil. This would help clean up the contaminated soil and allow the people of Africa and other third world countries to grow enough crops to effectively feed themselves. Are GMOs safe? That is something I haven't answered yet. The general consensus among both the scientific and technological communities is yes, GMOs are safe. That being said, due to some of the minor side effects, some GMOs are only approved for animal consumption and not human consumption. It is important to point out that scientists also mention that the particular GMOs do not need to be regulated. The process itself is what needs to be regulated. Thank you for your attention.